Welcome to Regulate and Rewire, an anxiety and depression podcast where we discuss the things I wish someone would have taught me earlier in my healing journey. I'm your host, Amanda Armstrong, and I'll be sharing my steps, my missteps, client experiences, and tangible research-based tools to help you regulate your nervous system, rewire your mind, and reclaim your life. Thanks for being here. Now let's dive in. Welcome back. This is part 4 of the Back to the Basics series, where I decided 100 episodes into this podcast to revisit the core components of what I mean when I say we understand and approach anxiety and depression through a nervous system lens, where I go through why we take a whole human, whole life approach to healing, what that even means to give mental and physical health an equal seat at the table. So, in summary of this series so far, we approach anxiety and depression as if all of your symptoms make sense, given your past lived experiences and current life circumstances. That dysregulation, what often gets labeled as anxiety or depression, occurs for 2 main reasons, which we talked about in part 3. Reason number 1 is that we are living in ways that are biologically abnormal. In our daily life, we have too many stressors and too little supporters. And reason number 2 is that we might be in our current life misinterpreting situations due to a hypersensitive nervous system that's conditioned by our past lived experience. So essentially, we have old patterning, old programming running the show in our everyday life. And the way that we approach this with clients is to help them assess their current way of living. Is this supporting regulation or promoting dysregulation? Do you have awareness of some of the unprocessed trauma or the wounded and burdened parts, your patterns that you're playing out that no longer feel applicable or no longer serving you? And this is really going to come to life in today's conversation, where we are going to talk all about the stress bucket, what it is, how you can use it, how we use it with clients. And really, it is a core tenet of the way that we approach working with clients, because it helps you create a clearer picture as to when we say your symptoms make sense based on your past lived experience. List that out. What are the past lived experiences that are currently contributing to the stress load on your nervous system, combined with your current life experiences, your current life circumstances? What are those? Different categories of those could be health conditions, relationships, environments, job stressors. And so the stress bucket is an analogy that we use in my practice to help you sort out your unique stress load. And then from that, create your unique and strategic path towards healing. One of the things I say a lot is that healing is like a 1,000-piece puzzle. It can feel really overwhelming at first, where to start, maybe pieces are missing. And in our practice, we see part of our role as coaches, as practitioners, to be helping you find all of the pieces and then to support you in arranging them in a way that works for your healing. So the stress bucket is something that we use to help our clients bring awareness to their unique puzzle pieces. And then from there, we offer them a framework to look at what they're carrying, what feels the heaviest, what feels the most meaningful and accessible to change right here, right now, today. What steps can you take to step into more regulated living based on your unique lived experience and current life circumstances? And our approach, the stress bucket being a big part of that, to healing, is trauma-informed and research-based in understanding that stress management, lifestyle, and understanding our deeper patterns are all essential pieces to long-term regulation and healing. And strategic healing. Strategic healing is a term I use a lot. We end up working with a lot of clients who feel like they have been on the hamster wheel of talking and talking and talking about the things that they're struggling with or have struggled with. We hear a lot, I know why I'm struggling, but I need the what. I need the how. What can I do to start to live differently? And so the stress bucket leads to what we call strategic healing as being the thing to cultivate awareness. Awareness always has to come before change.
This is about taking an honest look at your unique puzzle pieces, or more in line with the language and the conversation we're going to have specifically today, taking an honest look at what is in your stress bucket. So, to start, I will briefly revisit our nervous system ladder from part 1 of this series. Imagine there's a ladder. So, bring that ladder back to your mind that has 3 colored blocks representing each of our 3 primary nervous system states. So, at the top of that ladder is a green block, and this represents the green zone of regulation. That middle color block is yellow. This is our yellow zone of activation. This is where anxiety lives. And then at the bottom of that nervous system ladder is the red zone of shutdown, where depression lives. Now imagine that you are standing at the top of that ladder and you are holding a bucket. You are holding what we call your stress bucket. When the load on your nervous system is light, it's really easy to stay in that regulated state. But as the stress load from your life, from your past lived experience, comes into your bucket, as your stress bucket gets heavier and heavier, it pushes you further and further down that nervous system ladder. So if you currently find yourself living predominantly in the yellow zone, if you identify with labels of being an overthinker, feeling anxious, or if you predominantly find yourself in the red zone, depression, disconnected, numb, then the place to start is to ask why. Why does my nervous system feel the need to keep me stuck in this protective state of activation, or to keep me stuck in this protective state of disconnection, of shutdown? And the answer is always, again, coming back to this nervous system equation, the current state of your nervous system equals the combination of your past lived experiences and your current life circumstances and the stress load and that those create. And what we can offset that by is the healing work, is the tangible tools to navigate our nervous system with more agency. We're going to talk about that next week when we talk about reactive regulation. We offset this by doing the deeper healing work to lighten the load of our past lived experiences. We'll talk more about that the week after when we talk about proactive regulation. So the question to answer today is what is your stress bucket? So again, this is an analogy that we use to help you understand and assess your unique stress load. Because if you don't know what is contributing to keeping you stuck in anxiety or depression, keeping you stuck in states of activation or shut down chronic stress loops, then it's going to be really, really hard to strategically approach and handle and make change. Let me now introduce you to the different components that make up this analogy. So obviously there is this bucket. This bucket represents your nervous system, and the space inside represents your unique carrying capacity, your unique stress capacity. And what I mean by that is this is how much you can withstand and cope with without experiencing significant negative consequences. So this is what we call your carrying capacity. Then we have the water. So the water represents the stressors that come into your life. Some past, some present, some you can control, some we can't. We're going to expand on the water in a minute. Then we have the overflow. So I want you to imagine a bucket that got so full, water is now flowing over the edges. And the overflow represents your symptoms of dysregulation. And these symptoms tell us, so when your bucket starts to overflow, hey, you've exceeded your carrying capacity. Something needs to change. Symptoms are not here to annoy you. And when I say symptoms, I mean when you say you're anxious, how do you know? How do you know? Maybe your thoughts start to race. Maybe your heart speeds up. You get sweaty. Those are symptoms. Gut issues often come with long-term activation. Symptoms are not here to annoy you. They are here to communicate something to you, and they will get bigger, they will get louder, they will get worse. You will get pushed further down that nervous system ladder if you ignore those symptoms. They are there to get your attention, to tell you something is too much, something is not right, something doesn't feel safe, something needs to change, we're moving too fast. So just like a bucket can only hold so much water before overflowing or becoming too heavy to carry, your nervous system operates very similarly. Your nervous system can only handle so many stressors before it becomes overwhelmed, before it gets pushed into survival mode. So let's talk a little bit more about the water in your bucket, the stressors. First of all, I think stress gets a pretty bad rap. Stress is not all bad. And for one, it's an unavoidable part of life. And so just acknowledging that and accepting that is important. Was also a research study I read a while ago that talked about how your perception of stress actually impact how stressful stress is to you, if that makes sense, or your perception of stress can mitigate or exacerbate the negative impacts of stress. So if you look at stress as an unavoidable part of life, stress happens and I have the capacity to handle it, we're going to move through. Let's say that was a stress level 6. That is going to have that stress level 6 is going to have less negative impacts for you than, say, a stress level 6 for somebody who believes that life shouldn't be stressful and that all stress is bad. And they are going to make that even worse because they're going to have a stressful reaction to their stress. And to help you with this, I might tangent for just a minute and offer you another analogy to help you reframe your perspective on stress. I want you to think about stress like lifting weights at the gym. Just like strength training challenges your muscles to grow, manageable levels of stress also challenge your nervous system, and it helps to build your resilience and your adaptability. It helps to give you a bigger bucket so that in the future you can carry more before becoming overwhelmed. If we don't experience enough stress, like muscles that aren't exercised, our capacity to handle life's challenges can actually weaken, which leaves us more sensitive to even smaller amounts of stressors. So, for example, a young child who is given everything they want or protected from any of life's disappointments, this actually prevents them from facing these early stressors that in the long run inhibits their ability to practice and cultivate the skills of stress management. But on the other end of the spectrum, if we overload ourselves with too much stress, just like lifting weights that are too heavy, we risk strain, burnout, injury. So the key, again, is finding balance where stress pushes us enough to grow without overwhelming or damaging our system. And because I've talked to hundreds, if not thousands of you at this point, I know that for many of you, your experiences are that there was too much stress too early in life. There wasn't somebody in life who taught me how to be resilient, who taught me how to manage stressors, let alone manage stressors in a healthy, helpful way. And so part of healing is also being really gentle and compassionate with yourself about, I lack these skills, not because I suck. I lack these skills or I lack this capacity because it wasn't taught to me early on. And we'll likely talk a little bit more about that a little further in this conversation. So, to bring it back to the stress bucket, why we're talking about this is because stress management starts with assessing a potential mismatch between your carrying capacity and your current stress load. So, coming back to the water, let's take a better look at this weight, this load, the water in your bucket. And in the way we approach this with clients, we separate this water, these stressors, into two specific categories, two primary groups of stressors. The first is what we call baseline stressors. So you can imagine that as the bottom layer of water in your bucket. These are the things that do not change from day to day. These are the things that you wake up with and you carry around with you until you do some deeper, more intentional, probably some longer term work to change something about them. So, some examples of this could be an illness, some financial realities that are chronic, kind of long term, past trauma that we're carrying around, marginalization. So, when we come back and think about the equation of past lived experiences, current life circumstances, a lot of your past lived experiences are going to be here in the baseline stressors. But even some current life circumstances of, maybe there's a chronic illness or just an injury that you're dealing with, things that you're waking up with day after day for a longer period of time. So your baseline stressors don't change from day to day, but they can change with more intentional, proactive work. The second category of stressors are what we call daily stressors. So this consists of your day-to-day interactions and the different experiences you face. So examples of this could be your to-do list, a flat tire, lifestyle habits, environmental factors, interactions with family or coworkers, emails, notifications, traffic, parental responsibilities, where you look at it And some days there's more, some days there's less. Maybe you're looking at it and you're like, every day in my life, it feels like there's too many daily stressors. But what we do with each of our clients and what we would do with you if you went through our one-on-one coaching program, or what I invite you to consider doing on your own or with another practitioner that you feel really supported by, is to assess your stress bucket, to bring specificity and clarity to the load you are carrying. What are your baseline stressors? And then what are your daily stressors? So again, baseline stressors, what's the heaviness you wake up with day after day? Chronic pain, financial strain, poor sleeping, chronically poor sleeping habits, underlying health conditions, past trauma. And then what are your daily stressors? Something I won't go into too much here because we're really talking about the stress bucket. But what we also help our clients to assess in this process is what we call their supporters. So imagine a seesaw, and on one side is your stress bucket and everything that's in it, and on the other side are these blocks, these supporters. What we are aiming for in our healing journey is a balance between our supporters and our stressors, because we can take on a considerable amount of more stressors in our life if we also have a lot of help and support. But what we find so often to be far too common is the stress load is heavy with very few supportive habits, resources, people, folk in their life. And we find that a really valuable part of this kind of holistic assessment is also helping people acknowledge what supporters they do have in their life, and also to look at the potential imbalance between supporters and stressors. And I love to reiterate that approaching healing or stress management doesn't always have to be about less stressors. It doesn't always have to be about less hard. We can also spend seasons of our healing focusing on adding more good, cultivating and seeking out more things and resourcing in our life that feels supportive. And this concept of supporters is something we'll also likely visit in the next couple episodes on reactive and proactive resourcing. But today is really about helping you understand and giving you this framework to assess your stress load. One other analogy that I love to revisit or to share when talking about the stress bucket, and I actually think I shared this in part 1, but it bears repeating with the context of today's conversation. I want you to imagine walking into a gym and you see a 300-pound weighted barbell on the floor. Would you, without training, walk up to it and try to pick it up? No, probably not. And you likely know that if you were to try too hard for too long, you would hurt or injure yourself. And here's the thing. With this stress bucket assessment, many of you are going to realize that you have been walking around with a 300-pound bucket, with a 300-pound life that nobody taught you how to carry. So of course it feels heavy. Of course it's wearing you down. Of course it's pushed you into states of dysregulation. And it's not because you suck or you're not good enough. It's not because you were born like this or you have to be like this forever. And our approach to helping you heal involves holding space for you to acknowledge that load. In coaching sessions, to have a place where you can temporarily put down your load, unpack it, look at it, and intentionally choose what you want to keep carrying or how you can reorient to the parts of your load that you might not be able to put down. So the bottom line here is if your load feels heavy, it likely is. And if you feel like you are always one tiny thing from being thrown off or overreacting or shutting down, your bucket is too full. If you are struggling with anxiety or depression, your bucket is too full. And our approach to stress management starts with assessing what's there and looking at this potential mismatch between your carrying capacity and your current stress load, what you're carrying and your current skill set to manage stressors. You either need to decrease your stress load or increase your skill set, your carrying capacity by learning new emotional regulation skills, building a more resilient lifestyle, delegating, increasing your supporters in any number of ways. And for all of our clients, there's usually an element of both, decreasing load and learning new tangible tools and skills that increase their resilience and carrying capacity, because that's what you take with you for the rest of your life so that you aren't becoming, your bucket isn't overflowing all the time. So the goal is to have a stress load that leaves enough empty space for life to happen, because life does happen. And if you are living with your bucket 1 inch from the top all the time, it's not going to take much for you to become symptomatic. And some of you, you don't even have that inch. Your bucket is just overflowing all of the time. So the goal is to build awareness and then be strategic about approaching, oftentimes simplifying and optimizing your life. And this gets a lot easier when you understand how your physiology works, what the basic well-being pillars are, get the support, not just in knowing better, not knowing, okay, I should probably exercise or eat healthier, but having a supportive practitioner who understands physiology enough to support you in behavior change that's appropriate given your capacity and your life circumstances, and who's also trauma informed enough to be able to know, ooh, I don't think this is about a habit. I think this is about an underlying pattern. And we might want to spend some time unpacking that so that behavior change in your present life is easier. And I want to make one more point about why we find this stress bucket assessment to be such a foundational part of our process in helping people find really long-term healing. And it is because it provides choice points and clarity. Every single thing that you identify in your stress bucket assessment becomes a choice point. So, what I mean by that is a lot of times we hear our clients, I don't know what, I don't know how, like, where do I start? And once we've done the stress bucket assessment, we can look at their list of stressors, their baseline stressors or their daily stressors. And we look at that and we say, okay, what feels meaningful and what feels accessible? If your capacity is really low right now, we're probably not going to pick up some of the really, really heavy things that often live in your baseline stressors. Why don't we start with some of the smaller daily stressors? Can we make some tweaks to your daily life? And every small thing that we shift gives you just a little bit more space, a little bit more space, a little bit more space in that bucket. And when you feel like you have enough capacity, when you feel like you've added enough stability to your mind-body system, okay, now we might turn towards some of the heavier things. And so this is what I mean by the stress bucket gives you choice points. It also gives you choice points to come back to. If you feel like you make some traction in an area, okay, I think I'm doing good here. What now? Well, let's come back to our stress bucket. What now feels the most meaningful or accessible? Or maybe you make a choice and you're not getting traction, or it's not making the difference that you wanted it to in your healing journey. Okay, no big deal. Instead of being like, oh, I've tried everything, it's just like one other thing I've tried that hasn't worked. You're right. It's one other thing that doesn't seem to be what you need right now. No big deal. Let's come back. There are 50 other things in your stress bucket. What do we want to try? And there are innumerable ways for you to do an audit of your stressors, for you to assess. What I'm explaining to you is the way that we do this with clients. And when we are looking at baseline stressors, we actually have a pre-written list separated into categories like body health, connection and community, environments, mindset, life management, with pre-written out stressors. And they highlight the ones that apply to them. And then they have an area where they can write in things that are unique to them. Similarly, in daily stressors, similar categories. And everything one of our clients highlights becomes a choice point, becomes an access point to creating more capacity and stability and progress in their healing journey. Now, the other thing that I think doing the stress bucket assessment the way that we do with looking at baseline stressors versus daily stressors is that it provides some really specific clarity to how you might want to be more strategic about approaching your healing. So, for example, understanding these two categories and the proportion of your bucket that they take up can help guide you towards the most effective place to start when it comes to managing your stressors. So, for example, if you do this assessment and you realize that you have really high baseline stressors, but some low daily stressors, and I'll actually give an example of a client who this was real for in a minute. So if you have really high baseline stressors but low daily stressors, this could be due to having a greater amount of unresolved trauma or maybe a chronic health condition, or even, quote, like manageable amounts of daily stressors feel overwhelming for you. So if you're looking at your daily life and you're like, look, it isn't this stressful, like this shouldn't be too much for somebody to handle. It's possible that it feels extra hard because there is a lot of baseline stress on your system. And so, what this can tell you is that what might move the needle most in your healing is actually to prioritize some of those deeper issues. But what if instead you do this assessment and your baseline stressors are like the bottom few inches of your bucket? Because we all do. We all have some stress load that comes from our past lived experiences because we live in a messy human world with other messy humans. But let's say you do this assessment and you have low baseline stressors, but really high daily stressors. You are juggling a million different things. Maybe you have a million different kids, a million different roles or responsibilities or stressors. It actually doesn't matter where your baseline level of stressors are. Your bucket is going to overflow simply because there are too many daily stressors in your life coming in too consistently. So you can sit with a practitioner and talk about your childhood and those patterns all day long. But if something doesn't change about the logistics of your daily life, the health habits in your daily life, you are constantly going to still be in overflow. And so what this tells us when we have lower baseline and higher daily stressors, that what might move the needle most in your healing journey is an adjustment to your daily stress load, your daily lifestyle. Great. Those are two very different strategies. And if you're somebody who's like, I have high both, I have so much crap from the past that I'm carrying around, and my daily life is so full, hey, there's a combined approach. And this became really evident with something one of our members shared. So, for some context, we just updated our signature healing course. And as she was going through those modules, when she got to the one on the stress bucket, she shared, quote, I'm really finding this new course helpful in its simplicity. I had an aha with the stress bucket module. When we've talked about the stress bucket in the past, I always felt a bit confused. As for the most part, I don't have very much daily external stressors going on, but I still feel like my bucket overflows really easily. In this module, the way that it was taught, it clarified for me that it's most likely unresolved trauma and the physiological load on my body from menopause. Okay, so in addressing her stress bucket in this way, she was able to see that her daily stressors were not very much. She felt like she can handle her daily life, but because of her baseline stress load being so high, menopause taking such a chronic physiological toll, and the unresolved trauma, that gave her way more clarity in the steps that she needed to take to move forward. And I love when things click for our clients in a personalized way, because for this client, she realized the most impactful piece to her healing journey to address right now would likely be to work on that unresolved trauma and getting support in managing her menopause, which is a hugely different approach than another one of our clients who realized that they desperately needed to make changes to their packed schedule and cluttered home environment. Like I've said, for most of us, there is going to be work to do in both the baseline and daily stressors. But what I love, again, about this assessment is its simplicity. And do not mistake simplicity for ease. This can be a really challenging thing to look at. And this is why, while you can absolutely do this on your own, we have found that our clients have the best outcomes when they do this in a supported coaching session. And they also, what coaches, what therapists, what practitioners are trained to do is to help pull more from you than might be obvious to you initially. So, asking thoughtful questions, reading between the lines to be able to help you create a more comprehensive or accurate assessment of what you're carrying around. And how I will kind of summarize this stress bucket assessment conversation is to review the things that we help clients assess in case you want to do this on your own or with another practitioner. What we are doing is we are first helping our clients assess just basic wellness and habits. So their body health, those basic physiological, non-negotiable things that human bodies need to be well. We're also helping them assess for their sense of safety in their body, in their environment, in their relationships. We're looking at community and connection. We're having conversations about the weights from the past that they're carrying around. This could be unresolved trauma, an unhealed injury, different experiences. We're looking at environments, work environments, home environments, community environments, and what exists for that individual there. Their mindset. So, what are the thoughts that you think about yourself or others? What are the patterns and beliefs? What are the parts that exist for you there? Emotional load, are there particular emotions that feel really triggering or overwhelming for you? Daily life management. What's there? What's in this? Because, like I mentioned last week, I was labeled disordered before any practitioner helped me unpack what life looked like for me. And one of the most important things that I reiterate here is that there are fundamental research supported truths for being human. There are certain minimum standards of well being that, when they are not met, our nervous system lacks vital safety cues and resourcing, which will always increase our stress levels and decrease our capacity to handle stressors. You have basic physiological needs: 8 hours of sleep, proper nutrition and hydration, time outside and away from screens. Those are often places where we help our clients start. We also have basic psychological needs, things like connection and community, a sense of belonging and worth, manageable stress loads, safety, stability, time for creativity. Research shows us that a sense of community is one of the greatest mitigators of traumatic impact and one of the greatest contributors to post-traumatic healing and growth. And when, as a practitioner, I am working with somebody to improve their mental health, I believe that all of these things need to be acknowledged and considered. And the two things that I love most about going through this assessment process with clients is, number one, the self-compassion that comes for each of our clients from seeing all that they're carrying. This is a big aha moment, a light switch moment, often in their healing journey of, oh, I'm not broken. My load is just really heavy. And no wonder all of a sudden my symptoms make sense and the load is the problem, not me. Awesome. We can do something about the things, or many of the things, in that bucket. And the second thing is that it provides that clarity of, what does my strategic healing look like? The clarity and the choice points for them to lay out a personalized and comprehensive path forward for healing. Mental health looks different for everyone. There are no two stress buckets that are the same. And so the path to healing is going to be unique as well. To wrap things up, in summary, your stress bucket represents your nervous system's capacity to handle life's challenges. When this bucket overflows due to too many baseline or daily stressors, symptoms of anxiety, depression, activation, or shutdown. These are symptoms, can be psychological, they can also be physiological, physical. Symptoms emerge. And understanding your unique stress load provides clarity on where to start your healing journey. And it offers you multiple choice points along the way for creating meaningful change. All right, our 3 takeaways. Number 1, stress capacity. Everyone has a unique capacity for stress, and when we exceed it, we experience symptoms of dysregulation. Number 2, identify your stressors. And we talked about 2 types of stressors that fill your bucket: baseline stressors, which are past lived experiences, parts, patterns, chronic conditions, circumstances you wake up with on the daily. And then you have your daily stressors, the day-to-day interactions, to-dos, things on your schedule, or experiences that you face. And identifying both helps to create a personalized healing strategy. And number 3, strategic healing. Healing does not mean eliminating all stress, but instead in finding more balance, either by reducing your stress load or increasing your supports, your caring capacity through skills, resources, lifestyle change, coaching, therapy, friends, any number of things. All right, friend, I know we ran a little longer than normal with today's conversation, but I hope that there was something here that felt helpful or tangible enough for you to apply it to your healing journey. And just a reminder that I love to hear from you. If this or any of the conversations here on the podcast really resonate with you, or if you have a takeaway that you want to share or a question for me, send me a DM, send me an email, or better yet, shameless plug, I read every single one of the podcast reviews. If you are benefiting from this, it would mean the world to me for you to leave a 5-star rating and review. And as always, is an open invitation that if this resonates, if you are craving a more tangible, strategic, holistic, whole human approach to healing anxiety and depression, myself and my team would love the opportunity to support you. And you can always find the links in the show notes to book a completely free discovery call with me to learn more about our one-on-one coaching program. You'll also find the link to jump into and join me inside Regulated Living, which is my membership and nervous system healing space. All right, that's it. We'll wrap up, sending so much hope and healing your way.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Regulate and Rewire podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please subscribe and leave a 5-star review to help us get these powerful tools out to even more people who need them. And if you yourself are looking for more personalized support in applying what you've learned today, consider joining me inside Rise, my monthly mental health membership and nervous system healing space, or apply for our one-on-one anxiety and depression coaching program, Restore. I've shared a link for more information to both in the show notes. Again, thanks so much for being here, and I'll see you next time.